Ethan Cole stepped out of his black luxury car like a man walking onto a red carpet. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted his name, but he didn't even glance at them. His expensive watch gleamed under the morning sun as he adjusted his tie and smiled with confidence. To him, this was not a trial, it was a show, and he was the star. Inside the courthouse, people whispered as he walked past. Everyone knew who he was, the young tech millionaire who built his empire before turning 30. People respected his money, not his manners. He had a reputation for arrogance, for treating people like tools, and for never losing a single case. When the world bent to your wealth, why would you ever think it could break you? Ethan's lawyer, Mr. Harris, walked beside him nervously. "Ethan," he said quietly, "maybe this time, you should." Ethan raised his hand to stop him. "Relax, Harris. It's just another judge. Another small-town courtroom. I've faced worse. But this case was different." A few months earlier, a hit-and-run accident had left a factory worker named Daniel Brooks paralyzed. Witnesses claimed Ethan's car was at the scene. But Ethan denied everything. His lawyer had built a story that made Ethan sound innocent, a victim of mistaken identity. Ethan believed that with enough charm and money, truth was just a matter of purchase. As he entered the courtroom, his eyes fell on the woman sitting at the judge's bench. She was calm, composed, and serious. Her nameplate read, Judge Maya Roberts. Ethan chuckled softly. "A black lady judge," he whispered to Harris. "Well, that's new." His smirk carried the kind of arrogance that could fill the whole room. A few people turned to look at him, sensing the disrespect, but Maya didn't react. She simply opened a file and adjusted her glasses. Her silence spoke louder than his laughter. When the clerk asked everyone to rise, Ethan stayed seated. The entire courtroom stood, except him. His lawyer tugged his sleeve. "Ethan, stand up," he whispered urgently. But Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossed his legs, and whispered, "She should be standing for me." Judge Maya's eyes lifted slowly. For a brief second, their eyes met. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scold him. She simply said, "Noted," and continued the session. That single word, "noted," sent a quiet chill through the room. But Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy looking amused. The prosecutor began to speak. "Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Mr. Ethan Cole's vehicle was identified near the crime scene." Ethan leaned toward his lawyer. "This is boring," he muttered. "I'll be out by lunch." Judge Maya heard him but said nothing. She wrote something down on her notepad, her face unreadable. Her calmness made even the air in the room feel heavy. When the victim's wife took the stand, her voice trembled as she described the night of the accident. "My husband was just walking home," she said softly. "He was tired from work, and then a car hit him. He's never walked again." Ethan yawned quietly. Her voice cracked as she continued, "We can't even afford his medicine now. He was our only support." Ethan glanced at his lawyer and whispered, "Do we really have to listen to this?" For a moment, Judge Maya's pen stopped moving. She looked at him, not with anger, but with disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than rage. When the witness finished, the courtroom was silent. Everyone looked at Ethan, waiting for some reaction, but he just straightened his jacket and smiled slightly, as if nothing mattered. The prosecutor presented photos from the accident, a crushed bicycle, blood on the pavement, and a broken wristwatch that stopped ticking at 10:47 p.m. Ethan's car, a silver Aston Martin, had been captured by a traffic camera nearby. "Your Honor," said the prosecutor, "Mr. Cole's car was seen less than 2 blocks away from the accident at the same time." Ethan whispered to Harris, "Just say it was someone else driving." "You're the lawyer, make it sound smart." Harris hesitated. He looked tired, his voice shaky. "Your Honor," he began, "there are no witnesses proving my client was behind the wheel." Judge Maya nodded slowly. "We'll see," she said calmly. Her tone didn't reveal her thoughts. Ethan felt relaxed again. He thought he was winning. Every time she stayed quiet, he mistook it for weakness. Every time she paused, he thought she was impressed by him. He had no idea that silence could be the loudest warning of all. During a break, Ethan strutted into the hallway where reporters waited. "Mr. Cole," one shouted, "do you have anything to say about the victim?" Ethan smirked. "Accidents happen," he said carelessly. "People should be more careful on the road." A collective gasp filled the hall. Cameras flashed again. Somewhere inside the courtroom, Judge Maya heard the echoes of his words. She closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them again with quiet determination. When the court resumed, Maya's voice was firm. "Mr. Cole, I would like to hear from you directly," she said. Ethan stood with a lazy smile. "Of course, Your Honor. I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. I'm a good man. I donate to charities. I help people." Maya leaned forward slightly. "Did you help the man lying in the hospital right now?" The question hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Ethan's smile faded for the first time. I don't know him personally," he said. "No," Maya replied softly, "but he knows you." The room went still. For a moment, even the ticking clock on the wall seemed to stop. Maya then turned to the clerk. "Please mark that statement," she said. "We'll revisit it." Ethan sat down, pretending not to care, but his hands slightly trembled as he adjusted his tie again. Something about her calm voice made him uneasy. Later that afternoon, Maya requested the CCTV footage from nearby cameras. Ethan frowned. His lawyer had told him that footage was handled. So how was she getting it? He leaned toward Harris and whispered angrily, "Didn't you say it was gone?" Harris avoided his eyes. "It should have been," he muttered. Maya noticed the quiet tension but didn't say a word. She simply wrote something again on her notepad, her pen moving slowly, almost rhythmically, as if she already knew where this case was going. As the session ended, Maya announced, "We'll continue tomorrow. I want every piece of footage and every witness available. The truth deserves no shortcuts." Ethan smirked again as he stood up. "Fine. You'll see, Your Honor," he said mockingly, "the truth is on my side." Maya looked up, met his eyes, and smiled faintly. "Yes, Mr. Cole," she said. "It always is, for those who actually tell it." The courtroom doors opened. Reporters rushed forward, the noise of cameras filling the air again. But for the first time, Ethan didn't feel as sure as he did in the morning. Something about the way that judge spoke, it stayed in his head. As he walked out, his mother, who had come quietly and sat at the back, approached him. Her voice was low but firm. "Ethan," she said, "don't laugh at that woman again. You don't know what she's capable of." Ethan frowned. "She's just a judge." His mother shook her head. "No, son," she whispered. "She's justice, and justice doesn't care who you are." Ethan didn't reply. He just walked away, his expensive shoes echoing on the courthouse floor. But behind his confident walk, something small had begun to crack inside him, a shadow of doubt he couldn't explain. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass buildings. Cameras followed his every move, but for the first time, Ethan felt their light as heat, not glory. Somewhere inside that quiet courtroom, Judge Maya Roberts stayed behind, looking through the evidence again. She didn't rush. She didn't smile. She only said softly to herself, "He thinks he owns the court, but tomorrow, he'll learn who truly does." And with that, the long night began, a night that would decide whose laughter would last till morning. The next morning, the courtroom was filled long before the session began. People wanted to see the arrogant millionaire and the calm black judge face each other again. Reporters whispered, cameras flashed, and even the guards stood straighter than usual. The air carried a strange mix of tension and curiosity, as if everyone sensed that something important was about to happen. Ethan Cole walked in late, wearing a gray designer suit and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He acted relaxed, but inside, he felt something unfamiliar: pressure. He didn't like that feeling. He wasn't used to being uncomfortable. For years, his money had always protected him, always made life easy. But this judge, this Maya Roberts, didn't seem to care about his name or status. His lawyer, Mr. Harris, looked more nervous than usual. "Ethan," he said quietly, "please, just be careful today. Don't talk too much. Let me handle it." Ethan smirked. "You worry too much, Harris. I told you, I've got this." But deep down, he wasn't as sure as he sounded. Something about Judge Maya's calm eyes still echoed in his head. When Maya entered the courtroom, everyone stood. This time, Ethan stood too, but only after Harris gave him a sharp look. He rolled his eyes and muttered under his breath, "Happy now?" Maya noticed, but once again, she didn't react. Her silence was stronger than any lecture could have been. She simply nodded and began, "Court is now in session." The prosecutor, Ms. Bennett, stood up. She was confident, clear, and sharp. "Your Honor," she said, "we have received new evidence that may clarify what happened the night of the accident." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "New evidence?" he whispered to Harris. "What is she talking about?" Before Harris could answer, Ms. Bennett continued, "We have obtained traffic camera footage from a nearby street. The footage clearly shows Mr. Cole's car within 1 block of the incident location, exactly 3 minutes before the crash." The courtroom filled with murmurs. Ethan's jaw tightened. He leaned closer to his lawyer. "You said those tapes were gone." I thought they were," Harris stammered. "They said the system had an error." Judge Maya lifted her eyes toward them. "Is there a problem, gentlemen?" Ethan forced a smile. "No, Your Honor. Just a surprise." Maya nodded. "Then let us all share the surprise together." The clerk dimmed the lights, and the screen in front of the courtroom came alive. The video was grainy but clear enough. A silver Aston Martin sped past a small intersection. The timestamp showed 10:44 p.m., 3 minutes before the hit-and-run. Maya's eyes didn't move from the screen. "That is your car, Mr. Cole?" she asked calmly. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Looks like it, but I wasn't driving that night. My assistant often uses it." Ms. Bennett spoke immediately. "We also have a witness who saw the driver leaving a bar nearby, just minutes before the crash." A hush fell over the room. The side door opened, and a middle-aged man stepped in. He looked nervous, holding his cap tightly in his hands. "State your name for the record," Maya said. "Kevin Ross, ma'am. I work at the Ridgeway Bar, just 2 streets from where it happened." "And what did you see that night?" Kevin cleared his throat. "I saw Mr. Cole leaving the bar around 10:30. He'd had a few drinks. He got into his car and drove off alone." The courtroom went silent again. Ethan's face froze. His lawyer immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is unreliable. The witness could be mistaken." Maya looked at the witness. "Mr. Ross, are you certain of what you saw?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm sure. I remember because he tipped me $100 and told me to keep quiet about the drinks. I'll never forget that." A wave of whispers spread across the courtroom like a ripple in water. Ethan's mother covered her face in disbelief. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but his voice sounded forced. "That's ridiculous. He's making it up." Maya's calm voice cut through the noise. "We will decide what is truth, Mr. Cole. For now, sit down." For the first time, Ethan obeyed without another word. The witness stepped down, and Ms. Bennett presented more documents, receipts from the same bar, signed under Ethan's name, timestamped just before the crash. Maya looked through the papers quietly, then handed them back. "We will review these," she said softly. Ethan's lawyer whispered frantically, "You told me you didn't drink that night." Ethan hissed back, "I didn't remember. It was one time." "How does that prove anything?" Harris sighed deeply. "It proves you were driving drunk, Ethan. This is bad." Judge Maya turned to the courtroom. "We'll take a short recess. I need to review the evidence privately." As she left, Ethan slammed his hand on the table. "This is a joke. That woman's trying to ruin me," he snapped. People turned to look. Harris whispered harshly, "Stop it, Ethan. You're only making it worse." Ethan's anger burned like fire. "She hates me because I didn't stand up yesterday. That's what this is." But deep inside, he knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't hate. It was justice, something he'd never really faced before. When the court resumed, Maya returned with the same calm expression. Her presence filled the room like quiet thunder. "We will continue," she said. "But before we do, I want to ask Mr. Cole a question." Ethan straightened his jacket. "Of course, Your Honor." Maya looked directly at him. "You said you didn't drive that night. Your assistant did. Is that still your statement?" "Yes," he said confidently. Maya nodded once. "Then please tell us your assistant's name." Ethan blinked. "What?" "His name, Mr. Cole. The one you claim was driving your car." He froze. His mind raced. He hadn't expected her to ask that. He looked at Harris for help, but the lawyer only stared down at his notes. His name is," Ethan stammered. Maya raised her hand. "You don't remember?" "I have several employees," he muttered. "Interesting," Maya said calmly. "You seem to remember your watch brand, your car model, your private jet schedule, yet not the name of the person you claim committed a crime for you." A few people in the audience chuckled quietly. Ethan's face turned red. "Watch your tone," he snapped. Maya didn't flinch. "Watch your words, Mr. Cole. They define you." The courtroom was silent again. Ethan sank back into his chair. His arrogance began to fade, replaced by a strange mix of anger and fear. He had never been challenged like this before, not by anyone, and definitely not by someone who couldn't be bought. After reviewing more files, Maya finally said, "Court will resume tomorrow morning. I expect full details of all Mr. Cole's employees and car usage logs on my desk by then." Ethan stood abruptly. "This is a waste of time," he said loudly. "You're making a fool of yourself, Your Honor." Maya's voice stayed calm, but her words cut deep. "Mr. Cole, time reveals fools on its own. I only reveal truth." Gasps spread through the courtroom. Ethan's lips tightened, but he didn't respond. When the session ended, he walked out quickly, avoiding reporters this time. His mother followed him to the car. "Ethan," she said softly, "you can't fight her like this. You're not above the truth." Ethan slammed the car door. "You sound just like her." As they drove off, the courthouse behind him glowed in the afternoon sun. Inside, Judge Maya sat alone, staring at the still image of his car on the monitor. She whispered quietly to herself, "Arrogance always hides fear. And fear always leads to truth." She closed the file, her eyes steady. She knew the case wasn't just about justice anymore, it was about teaching a man who had never faced consequence that even silence can have power. And somewhere, in the backseat of his expensive car, Ethan Cole began to realize something he had never felt before, the slow, cold touch of losing control. That night, the city outside the courthouse buzzed with noise, traffic, flashing lights, and the chatter of news anchors repeating Ethan Cole's name. Every major network was talking about him. The arrogant millionaire, they called him. The man who disrespected the judge. Inside his penthouse, Ethan sat by the window with a glass of whiskey in his hand. He stared at the skyline, but his mind wasn't calm. His reflection on the glass looked unfamiliar, the same sharp jaw, the same confident eyes, but behind them was a shadow of something he didn't recognize. Fear. His lawyer, Harris, paced across the room. "Ethan, this case is slipping out of control," he said. "That judge, she's not like the others. She won't be bought, she won't be scared." Ethan laughed bitterly. "Everyone has a price, Harris. You just haven't found hers yet." Harris stopped walking. "That's exactly your problem, Ethan. You think everything is for sale." Ethan turned sharply. "It's always worked before." "Not this time," Harris said. "Maya Roberts isn't just a judge, she's a symbol. If you push her, you'll lose everything." Ethan's smirk faded slightly. "You think she scares me?" "I think she sees through you," Harris replied quietly. "And that should." The room fell silent. The sound of rain began tapping against the glass. Ethan's mind drifted back to the courtroom, her eyes, calm and deep, never angry, never shaken. That silence had felt like a wall he couldn't break through. He poured another drink, trying to drown the thought. "Tomorrow, I'll crush her with evidence," he muttered. But the truth was already moving toward him, quietly, slowly, like a shadow he didn't see coming. The next morning, Maya arrived at the courthouse early. She carried no security, no entourage, just her files and a sense of calm purpose. Her assistant, Carla, handed her a folder. "Judge Roberts, the new reports from the police are here," she said. Maya nodded. "Thank you." She flipped through the pages. Something caught her eye, a name she recognized. The car mechanic who serviced Ethan's Aston Martin was the same man who repaired the victim's bicycle a year earlier. Coincidence? Maybe. But Maya didn't believe in coincidences. She closed the file slowly. "Sometimes, truth hides in the smallest detail," she whispered. Before the hearing started, she called the detective in charge. "Detective Hall, please verify this mechanic's records and the car's GPS history again. I have a feeling something's missing." When court resumed, the atmosphere was heavier than before. Reporters packed every seat. The public wanted to see if the rich man's smile would survive another round. Ethan walked in with forced confidence. His suit was perfect, his expression unreadable, but his fingers tapped nervously against his thigh. Harris followed, looking exhausted. Maya entered, and everyone stood. This time, Ethan rose too, a little quicker than before. The small gesture didn't go unnoticed. "Good morning," Maya said calmly. "Let's begin." Ms. Bennett, the prosecutor, stood with a new file in her hands. "Your Honor, new evidence has come forward this morning, evidence from the vehicle's GPS tracker and the service logs." Ethan's expression tightened. "What now?" he muttered. Maya gestured for her to continue. "The car's tracker shows it was parked near the accident scene at 10:46 p.m., Bennett said, but it also recorded a brief stop at a private property registered under Mr. Cole's name, a property not listed in his original statement." Maya raised her eyes. "A private property?" "Yes, Your Honor. A small warehouse on the east side of the city." Ethan's lawyer jumped in. "That location is irrelevant. It's one of many properties Mr. Cole owns." "Then you won't mind if we visit it," Maya said softly. Ethan's hand froze. "What?" "It's part of the investigation now," she replied. "If you have nothing to hide, there's no reason to object." Ethan forced a smile. "Of course not." But beneath the table, his palms had begun to sweat. That warehouse, he hadn't thought about it in months. Not since that night. Later, during lunch recess, Harris confronted him outside. "Ethan, what's in that warehouse?" "Just storage," Ethan lied quickly. "Old equipment. Nothing important." Harris studied his face. "Are you sure?" Ethan met his gaze, unblinking. "Completely." But deep inside, he knew the truth. The night of the accident, he'd driven there after the crash. He had parked his car, replaced the damaged bumper, and paid one of his staff to keep quiet. He thought it was buried forever. Now, it was digging its way back up. That afternoon, Detective Hall entered the courtroom with a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, we have the requested photos from the warehouse," he said. Maya opened the file. Inside were pictures of a silver Aston Martin, the same model as Ethan's, with a replaced front bumper. The new part serial number matched a purchase order made the day after the accident. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Maya looked up slowly. "Mr. Cole, would you like to explain this?" Ethan tried to keep his cool. I replaced it because it was scratched." "That proves nothing." "Perhaps," Maya said. "But tell me, why was there blood found under the frame of your old bumper?" Ethan's breath caught. The world seemed to tilt for a moment. Ms. Bennett continued, "Forensics matched the blood to the victim, Daniel Brooks." The courtroom went silent. You could hear the hum of the ceiling fan, the faint shuffle of a paper, and nothing else. Ethan swallowed hard. "That's impossible," he said. "Someone's framing me." Maya leaned back slightly. "And who would do that, Mr. Cole?" I don't know," he said, his voice cracking slightly. Her gaze softened, but her words stayed firm. "Truth has a way of finding its way through money and lies. You should have learned that by now." For the first time, Ethan didn't have an answer. After the session ended, Ethan left the courthouse without saying a word. Reporters shouted questions, but he ignored them all. His mother waited by the car, her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan," she said softly, "how far will you go to protect your pride?" He stared ahead. "You think I did it, don't you?" She sighed. "I think you stopped knowing what's right a long time ago." Her words stung more than any verdict. That night, alone in his penthouse, Ethan poured another drink. But it didn't calm him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the man's face, the victim's wife crying, the photo of the crushed bicycle, and the quiet eyes of Judge Maya Roberts. He slammed the glass against the wall, watching it shatter into 1,000 pieces. "How did this happen?" he whispered to himself. "How did I lose control?" Meanwhile, in her small office, Maya sat reading the case files again. She paused at a photograph of the injured worker and his family. A quiet sadness filled her eyes. She remembered when she first became a judge, how people doubted her, laughed behind her back, questioned her authority because of her color and gender. Now she faced a man who did all of that openly. But she didn't feel anger, only a sense of purpose. "He needs to see that power doesn't make you great," she said softly. "Character does." Her assistant entered with new documents. "Judge Roberts, we found something else." The security footage from the bar's parking lot. Maya looked up. "And?" The assistant placed the photo on her desk. Ethan Cole's face, clearly visible, sitting behind the wheel with a drink in his hand. Maya nodded slowly. The truth always hides, but it never disappears. That night, Ethan received a message on his phone, an unknown number. "You can't hide forever. The truth is already in motion." He froze. The message had no name, no number traceable. He looked out the window into the rain-soaked city. For the first time in his life, he felt small. Tomorrow, he would walk back into that courtroom. But the man who thought he owned it was already beginning to crumble from within. Because now, the truth had a face, and it was coming for him. The courtroom felt colder that morning. The lights were bright, but the air carried a heavy silence. Everyone could sense that something had shifted. The confident, untouchable millionaire who once smirked at the black judge was no longer the same. Ethan Cole walked in wearing the same expensive suit, but his posture was stiff, his face pale. The press no longer called him a genius, they called him the arrogant defendant on the edge of downfall. As he took his seat beside his lawyer, Mr. Harris, whispers filled the room. Cameras clicked softly in the back, catching every movement, every breath. Ethan ignored them, but inside, his heartbeat was uneven. He felt trapped in a story he could no longer control. When Judge Maya Roberts entered, everyone stood. Everyone, except Ethan. For a brief second, his pride flickered again. He told himself, I won't bow to her. But as the entire courtroom rose, his lawyer grabbed his arm sharply. Ethan, Harris whispered urgently, not today. Please. Ethan hesitated, torn between ego and fear. But before he could decide, Maya's eyes met his. Calm. Still. Unshaken. There was no anger in her gaze, only a quiet certainty. He felt something strange then, guilt. He stood up slowly, his head low, avoiding her eyes. Maya gave a small nod. Thank you, Mr. Cole, she said softly. Just like that, the room breathed again. But for Ethan, it felt like losing a war he hadn't realized had started. The hearing began. Ms. Bennett, the prosecutor, stood with calm determination. Your Honor, she said, new forensic analysis confirms the blood found on Mr. Cole's vehicle belongs to Daniel Brooks, the victim. The courtroom erupted in low gasps. Ethan clenched his fists under the table. Harris leaned in and whispered, we can still fight this, Ethan. Just stay quiet. But Ethan's silence wasn't control, it was panic. Maya raised her hand, and the room fell quiet. Please continue, Ms. Bennett. We also discovered security footage from the warehouse registered under Mr. Cole's name. The footage shows his car entering the property just after 11 p.m., only 15 minutes after the accident. The damaged front bumper is visible. Ethan's chest tightened. His mind flashed back to that night, the sound of glass breaking, the impact, the fear. He remembered how his hands had shaken on the steering wheel, how he'd hidden the car, thinking no one would ever find out. Now, that memory stood before the world. Ms. Bennett continued, her voice calm but firm. Your Honor, the evidence suggests the defendant attempted to conceal the crime rather than report it. We request the court to consider this as obstruction of justice. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. That's not true, he shouted. I didn't mean to. Maya lifted her hand, stopping him. Mr. Cole, she said firmly, you will have your turn to speak. Sit down. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, a kind of power that silenced him instantly. He sank back into his chair, breathing heavily. The cameras caught every second of it. During the break, Ethan sat in the hallway, away from the crowd. Reporters shouted questions, flashes blinded him, but all he could hear was his own heartbeat. His mother sat quietly beside him. Ethan, she said softly, you don't have to destroy yourself just to win. He looked at her, his eyes tired. I can't lose, Mom. You raised me better than that. She shook her head. No. I raised you to be strong, not heartless. There's a difference. Her words pierced deeper than she knew. Ethan looked away, jaw tight. You think I meant to hurt that man? I think you stopped caring long before you did, she said sadly. He said nothing. For the first time in years, he didn't have a clever comeback. When court resumed, Maya addressed him directly. Mr. Cole, the court has seen enough evidence to question your account. But before proceeding further, I want to give you a chance, one opportunity, to speak truthfully. Not through your lawyer. Not through your money. Through yourself. The room went silent. Ethan froze. His throat felt dry. Harris whispered urgently, "Don't do it, Ethan. Anything you say can be used against you." But Maya's gaze held him. For some reason he couldn't explain, he wanted to speak. He stood slowly. "Your Honor. I didn't plan it. It was late. I'd been drinking. I thought I could drive." A murmur rippled through the audience. Harris buried his face in his hands. Ethan continued, his voice cracking. "I saw someone crossing the street. I tried to stop, but it happened too fast. I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Tears welled in his mother's eyes. For the first time, Ethan's voice wasn't proud or polished. It was human. "I was scared," he said softly. "Scared of losing everything. So I hid it. I told myself it wasn't my fault." He looked at Maya then, his voice trembling. "But maybe it was." Maya's face remained calm, but there was a glimmer of emotion in her eyes. "Mr. Cole," she said gently, "truth always finds its way, even through fear." The courtroom was utterly still. No cameras clicked. No one moved. Maya looked down at her notes. "This court will resume tomorrow for the verdict. Until then, Mr. Cole will remain under supervision." Ethan nodded silently. There was no argument left in him. That night, Maya sat alone in her office, reviewing the day's notes. Her assistant brought her tea, but she barely touched it. She stared out the window at the city lights and thought about Ethan, not as a criminal, but as a man who had never learned accountability. She whispered to herself, "He finally spoke the truth. Maybe there's hope yet." Then she opened another file, something she hadn't shared yet. Inside was a witness statement from one of Ethan's employees, the mechanic who had replaced the bumper. The statement read, "Mr. Cole told me not to mention anything about the damage. He said if I stayed quiet, he'd pay off my debts." Maya sighed softly. She knew tomorrow would not just end a case, it would end a life as Ethan knew it. But sometimes, justice had to hurt before it could heal. Meanwhile, in his holding room, Ethan sat on the edge of the small bench, staring at the floor. The metal walls around him felt colder than he expected. His phone had been taken, his suit jacket folded neatly beside him. He thought about Daniel Brooks, the man he had hit, the life he had ruined. He thought about his own father, a man who taught him that winning is everything. For the first time, he began to wonder if his father had been wrong. As the night stretched on, Ethan whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, I'll face it. Whatever it is, I'll face it." He didn't know what Maya Roberts would decide. But deep down, he already knew that something had changed forever. The man who once laughed at the judge was gone. In his place sat a man stripped of pride, staring at the weight of his choices. Outside, thunder rolled across the dark sky. The storm had finally arrived, not to destroy, but to cleanse. And as the city slept, both Ethan and Maya lay awake, each carrying the heavy truth that tomorrow, the courtroom would never be the same again. The morning light poured through the courthouse windows like a silent witness. Every corner of the courtroom was filled, reporters, families, curious onlookers. Today was the day everyone had been waiting for. The day Judge Maya Roberts would deliver her verdict in the state versus Ethan Cole. But something unusual happened before the proceedings began. A woman entered the courtroom quietly, wearing a navy coat and holding a worn leather folder. Her face carried both pain and determination. She sat in the back, unnoticed by most. Maya's eyes flickered toward her only once, recognition sparked briefly, then vanished behind a mask of professionalism. Ethan Cole was brought in moments later. His face was pale, his shoulders slumped. Gone was the confident businessman who once believed money could buy silence. In his place stood a man who looked empty. His eyes darted around the room, searching for familiar faces. His mother was there, tears in her eyes, her hand pressed to her heart. He took a seat beside his lawyer, Mr. Harris, and whispered, "Do you think she'll go easy on me?" Harris sighed. "That depends on whether she sees a man who made a mistake or one who tried to bury it." Ethan swallowed hard. "And what do you see?" The lawyer didn't answer. He didn't need to. Judge Maya entered. The courtroom rose. Ethan stood this time, quickly, without hesitation. When Maya sat, everyone followed. She adjusted her glasses, then looked straight at Ethan. "Before I announce my decision," she said, "this court has received new information overnight. A written statement from a witness who has remained silent until now." A wave of whispers moved through the courtroom. Ethan frowned. "What new statement?" he whispered to Harris. Maya continued, "The court clerk will read the letter." The clerk unfolded a sheet of paper. The letter is from Angela Brooks, the widow of the victim, Daniel Brooks. Ethan's heart stopped for a moment. The woman in the navy coat stood slowly. Her eyes locked onto his. Angela Brooks' voice trembled at first but grew stronger with every word. "Your Honor, I've spent months trying to understand why my husband had to die. I wanted revenge. I wanted the man who took him to suffer. But last week, when I saw Mr. Cole on the news, the arrogance, the pride, I realized something. My husband's death broke me, but it also showed me what pride can destroy. I don't want revenge anymore. I want truth." She looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Cole, you didn't just kill my husband that night. You killed your own peace. You've been living in a prison long before you ever saw this one." Ethan's throat tightened. His eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. For the first time, he saw not an enemy, but a human being standing in front of him. Angela's voice softened. "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to live again. My husband was a man who believed in second chances. I think he'd want me to say this." The courtroom was silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. Maya's face remained calm, but her fingers tightened slightly on the bench. She took a deep breath and spoke gently, "Thank you, Mrs. Brooks. Your courage honors this court." Angela nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, and returned to her seat. Ethan couldn't breathe. His chest ached as if every word she said had pierced him. He turned slowly to Maya. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. "Go ahead, Mr. Cole." He stood, trembling slightly. "I don't know what forgiveness means anymore," he said softly. "All my life, I thought being powerful meant being untouchable. I thought rules were for other people. I thought I could buy respect." He paused, voice breaking. "But standing here today, I realize I've lost everything that actually mattered." He looked at Angela. "You had every right to hate me. But you showed me mercy I don't deserve. I'll carry that forever." He turned back to Maya. "Whatever you decide, I won't argue. I just want to start being human again." For a long moment, no one spoke. The air was thick with emotion. Even Maya's eyes glimmered faintly, though her tone remained steady. "Mr. Cole," she said, "you have finally spoken truth. But justice must still be served." She paused. "The law cannot erase what has been done. However, it can choose how you will live with it." Ethan's hands trembled as he waited. "This court finds you guilty of manslaughter and obstruction of justice," Maya announced. "But in recognition of your confession and the victim's family's request for leniency, I sentence you to 8 years in prison, with eligibility for rehabilitation and community service upon release." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Some were shocked. Some were moved. Ethan closed his eyes. The verdict hit him like a wave, not of anger, but of relief. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was falling. He felt free. As the guards came forward, Maya spoke again. "Before you are taken, I want to tell you something, Mr. Cole." He looked up, surprised. "When I first saw you in this courtroom, I saw a man drowning in arrogance. But today, I see a man finally learning to breathe." Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. Maya continued, her voice soft but firm. "You disrespected this court because you couldn't stand the sight of a black judge telling you that your power has limits. But power without conscience is nothing. I hope when you walk out of prison, you remember that." He nodded slowly, tears falling freely now. "I will, Your Honor." Maya gave one final look, not of judgment, but of something deeper. Understanding. Then she struck the gavel. Court adjourned. The sound echoed like thunder. Reporters rushed to the exits. Cameras flashed. Angela Brooks quietly walked past Ethan as the guards prepared to lead him away. She stopped for a moment, close enough for him to hear her whisper. "My husband believed every soul can find its way home. Don't waste this chance." Ethan nodded, voice barely a whisper. "I won't." As she left, Maya remained seated, watching him go. For the first time, the courtroom didn't feel divided, it felt healed. Later that evening, after everyone had gone, Maya stood alone in the empty courtroom. The sunlight had faded, and only the echoes of the day remained. She looked at the judge's bench, her bench, and exhaled slowly. Her assistant entered quietly. "Judge Roberts, are you all right?" Maya nodded. "Yes. I think today, justice finally meant something." She looked at the empty defendant's chair one last time. "Sometimes," she murmured, "the hardest part of justice is forgiveness." The assistant didn't understand the depth of her words, but Maya did. Because years ago, long before she wore the robe, her own brother had died in a hit-and-run. The driver was never found. And now, standing in the same courtroom, watching a guilty man finally learn remorse, she felt something inside her begin to heal. The unseen connection between pain, justice, and mercy had finally come full circle. The heavy metal doors slammed shut behind him with a sound that seemed to echo inside his soul. Ethan Cole had entered a place where his name, wealth, and influence meant nothing. The world outside called him Mr. Cole, the billionaire, the genius. But here, he was just number 4729. The guards walked him down a long corridor that smelled of sweat, iron, and regret. The walls were cold, the lights harsh, and the silence between footsteps almost unbearable. Every clang of a door reminded him of the night he lost control, the night that changed everything. When they finally reached his cell, a guard opened the door with a loud buzz. "This is your home now," the man said flatly. Ethan stepped in. The room was small, a narrow bed, a metal sink, a toilet, and a barred window that barely showed a slice of sky. The guard closed the door behind him. The sound of the lock clicking was final, sharp, and cruel. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his hands. They were trembling. For the first time in years, he had no control, no phone, no lawyer, just silence. He whispered to himself, "This is what I earned." Days turned into weeks. The routine was the same: wake up, line up, eat, work, sleep. Every movement was monitored. Every decision was made for him. It stripped away the last pieces of the proud man he once was. Other inmates watched him with curiosity. Some mocked him. Others ignored him completely. To them, he was just another rich man who had finally fallen. One afternoon, during lunch, a tall inmate named Marcus sat across from him. Marcus had a scar across his cheek and calm eyes that carried stories of pain and wisdom. "So," Marcus said with a smirk, "you're the guy who laughed at a judge, huh?" Ethan looked up slowly. "That was a long time ago." Marcus chuckled. "In here, time doesn't erase what you did. It just makes you face it." Ethan didn't reply. Marcus leaned closer. "You think that judge hated you?" Ethan hesitated. I don't know. Maybe. Marcus shook his head. Nah. She didn't hate you. If she did, she'd have thrown you in here for life. You know what she did instead? Ethan frowned. What? She gave you a chance to become someone new. Most people never get that. Those words stayed with Ethan long after Marcus walked away. One night, unable to sleep, Ethan stared through the small barred window. The moonlight cast faint lines across the wall. He thought about Judge Maya Roberts, her steady voice, her eyes that saw through his arrogance, the way she'd said, "You finally learned to breathe." He hadn't understood it then. But now, in the stillness of his cell, he did. He realized that the life he'd built before wasn't life at all. It was performance, a mask made of money, pride, and fear. And somewhere beneath all that, the real Ethan Cole had been suffocating. Weeks later, the prison announced a rehabilitation program, a chance for inmates to volunteer in community work projects. Ethan signed up immediately. When the guard called his name, some inmates laughed. "Mr. Moneybags wants to plant trees now," one of them joked. Ethan didn't respond. For once, he didn't care what they thought. They were taken to a small town an hour away, where they helped repair homes for low-income families. Ethan worked quietly, carrying wood, mixing cement, painting walls. It was backbreaking work, but with each nail hammered, each wall painted, something inside him healed. One afternoon, a little boy approached him, maybe 8 years old, holding a football. "Hey, mister, are you the man from TV?" the boy asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "I was." "Not anymore." The boy nodded, studying him. "My mom says people can change if they really mean it." Ethan knelt down to his level. "Your mom's a smart woman." The boy grinned and handed him the football. "Wanna play?" Ethan hesitated, then laughed softly. "Yeah. Why not?" For the first time in years, laughter didn't feel like arrogance. It felt human. Back in prison, Marcus noticed the change. "You're different now," he said one evening in the yard. Ethan shrugged. "Maybe I finally stopped running." Marcus smiled. "From the judge?" Ethan shook his head. "From myself." Months passed. Ethan spent his time in the library, reading about law, ethics, and justice. The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who once disrespected the court now wanted to understand it. He started helping other inmates write letters, appeals, even reading them their case documents. Word spread. They began calling him Professor. But Ethan didn't see it as redemption. He saw it as responsibility, the least he could do with the years he had left. Then, one morning, he received a letter from outside. It was written in neat handwriting. No return address. He opened it carefully. "Mr. Cole, I saw the reports of your work in the rehabilitation program. I wanted you to know that my son Daniel always believed people could change. If he were alive, he would have been proud to see this. Angela Brooks." Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, reading it over and over again. Then he folded it gently, placed it in his chest pocket, and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't notice the tears until they fell on the paper. That night, he dreamed of the courtroom again, but this time, it was empty. No flashing cameras, no reporters, no angry crowd. Just him and Judge Maya Roberts. She stood behind the bench, silent, her eyes calm. He spoke first. "You were right," he said. "Power without conscience is nothing." Maya smiled softly in the dream. "Then maybe you've finally found what real power is." He woke up with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. Months later, during a quiet afternoon in the prison garden, Marcus handed him a newspaper. "You made the front page again," he said with a grin. Ethan frowned. "For what?" Marcus tapped the headline. Former CEO helps inmates earn GEDs, inspires rehabilitation reform. Ethan smiled faintly, shaking his head. Guess I finally made the news for something that matters. Marcus chuckled. Looks like the judge was right about you after all. That night, as the lights dimmed, Ethan sat by the window again, watching the stars. He whispered into the dark, I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. The wind outside rustled softly, almost as if the universe had heard him. He was no longer the man who laughed at a black judge. He was no longer the man who thought he owned the world. He was just Ethan, a man finally paying the price for redemption. And for the first time, that price didn't feel like punishment. It felt like purpose. A year had passed since Ethan Cole first walked into prison. The seasons had changed outside those concrete walls, but inside, the rhythm of life remained the same: wake, work, reflect, sleep. Yet for Ethan, something had shifted quietly but powerfully. He no longer counted days. He counted lessons. He spent most of his time in the prison library now, helping others read, write letters, and understand their legal cases. Some inmates respected him. Others still mocked him. But he didn't care. He had learned to listen more than he spoke, something the old Ethan could never have done. That morning, a guard appeared at the door. Cole, you've got a visitor. Ethan frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. His mother hadn't been well, and he rarely heard from anyone else. Who is it? The guard shrugged. Didn't say. Just, better get to the room. Ethan nodded and followed. The familiar echo of boots on concrete filled the corridor. His heart beat faster with each step. Something about the uncertainty made him uneasy. When he entered the visitation room, he froze. Sitting on the other side of the glass was Judge Maya Roberts. For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. He stood there, motionless, staring at the woman who had once decided his fate. She looked different outside the courtroom, no robe, no gavel, just a calm presence dressed in a simple navy suit. He finally sat down, picked up the phone, and spoke through the glass. Judge Roberts. I didn't expect to ever see you again. Maya smiled faintly. I imagine not. But I had to see for myself. He tilted his head. See what? Whether the man I sentenced that day was gone, she said quietly, and whether the one sitting before me is truly new. Ethan swallowed hard. And what do you think? She studied him for a long moment. I think there's something different in your eyes. They're quieter now. He gave a small, humorless laugh. That's what losing everything does to you. Maya leaned slightly closer. No, Mr. Cole. That's what finding yourself does to you. Her words hit him harder than he expected. For a moment, they sat in silence, just two people from completely different worlds connected by one story neither could forget. Finally, Ethan asked, Why did you come here? After everything? Maya's gaze softened. Because sometimes, justice doesn't end with a verdict. Sometimes it begins there. Ethan frowned slightly. You mean forgiveness? I mean accountability, she said. The world saw you as a monster that day. But I saw something else, a man terrified of his own reflection. He looked down. I think I still am. She shook her head gently. Then you're learning. The ones who fear their reflection are the ones who change. Ethan hesitated, then said quietly, Judge Roberts, I've wanted to tell you something since that day. Maya raised an eyebrow. Go on. When I refused to stand for you, it wasn't just arrogance, he said. It was fear. Fear of being seen. Fear that if I looked at you, I'd see everything I tried to hide, my guilt, my lies, my weakness. You weren't just a judge to me that day. You were a mirror I didn't want to face. Maya's eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. I used to think respect was something you could demand, Ethan continued. Now I understand it's something you earn, by listening, by admitting when you're wrong, by standing up, not for pride, but for truth. A long silence followed. Maya nodded slowly, her voice low but steady. You've learned what most men never do. Then she did something Ethan didn't expect. She reached into her bag and pulled out a file, slim, with a single sheet of paper inside. I didn't come here just to talk, she said. There's something else. Ethan frowned. What is it? It's a recommendation, she replied. For early release under the Rehabilitation Review Program. You've been nominated for it. Ethan's eyes widened. What? You've completed every program, every hour of service, and helped over 30 inmates earn their GEDs, she said. I spoke to the board myself. He stared at her, stunned. You spoke for me? I did, Maya said simply. Not as a judge. As someone who believes in second chances. Ethan's throat tightened. He could barely speak. Why? After everything I did? Maya's voice softened. Because Angela Brooks believed you could change. And now, so do I. Ethan leaned back, tears welling in his eyes. For so long, he had carried the weight of his crime, the shame, the guilt. And now, this act of mercy, broke him in ways punishment never could. I don't know what to say, he whispered. Then say nothing, she said gently. Just prove it. He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. I will. I swear I will. Maya smiled, a real, warm smile this time. I believe you. Before she left, she paused at the door and turned to him. Mr. Cole, there's one more thing I want you to remember. He looked up, his eyes still wet. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, she said softly. It just stops the past from owning you. Ethan nodded, his voice quiet. Thank you, Judge Roberts. She gave a small nod and left the room. For a long time, Ethan sat there, staring at the empty chair where she'd been. His reflection in the glass looked different now, older, humbler, freer. Weeks later, the official notice came through, Ethan Cole's sentence reduced. Early release granted for exemplary rehabilitation and service. When the guard handed him the paper, Ethan just stared at it in silence. Marcus grinned beside him. Looks like you're getting out, Professor. Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah. I guess I am. Marcus slapped his shoulder. Don't forget us out here. Ethan shook his head. I won't. I promise. That night, before lights out, Ethan took Angela Brooks' letter from his pocket, the one that had changed everything, and read it one last time. Then he folded it neatly and placed it in the center of his Bible. Tomorrow, he whispered to himself, I start again. The man who once laughed at justice now understood its deepest truth, that mercy and strength are not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. As the lights went out and the prison sank into silence, Ethan closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't haunted by the past. He was finally ready for the future. The sun was bright that morning, too bright for someone who hadn't seen an open sky without bars in over 2 years. Ethan Cole stepped out of the prison gates wearing a plain gray shirt and holding a small bag of his belongings. The wind felt strange on his face. Free. A van waited nearby. A social worker stood by the door, clipboard in hand. Mr. Cole, she said politely. We'll take you to your transitional housing in the city. You'll be meeting with your parole officer this afternoon. Ethan nodded quietly. Thank you. As he got in the van, the gates clanged shut behind him. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. That part of his life was over. But he also knew something deeper, freedom wasn't a reward. It was a test. The ride back to the city was long and silent. He watched the familiar streets pass by, the billboards, the restaurants, the world that had once revolved around him. He saw his old office building, still standing tall with his name removed from the entrance. The world had moved on without him, and strangely, he was glad it had. When they reached his assigned halfway home, a middle-aged man named Leo greeted him with a warm smile. "You're the new arrival, huh?" Ethan nodded. "Yes, sir." Leo chuckled. "No need for sir. Just Leo. Everyone here's trying to find their footing again. You'll fit right in." Ethan smiled faintly. "I hope so." Leo looked at him for a moment. "I know who you are, Ethan. Everyone does. But don't worry, around here, your past doesn't define you. What you do now does." Those words felt like a second chance written in plain speech. Weeks passed quietly. Ethan took a job at a small legal aid center, helping former inmates reintegrate into society. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The once arrogant millionaire who mocked the law now spent his days helping others understand it. At first, some people didn't trust him. Reporters tried to find him, digging for a story, but Ethan refused interviews. "I'm not a story," he told Leo one day. "I'm just a man trying to live right." But life had other plans. One afternoon, as Ethan finished organizing files at the office, the receptionist came in. "Someone's here to see you," she said. He frowned. "Who?" "She didn't say. Just that you'd know her." Ethan walked into the small waiting area, and froze. Standing there was Angela Brooks. Her presence was calm but powerful, like a quiet storm that carried both pain and peace. He hesitated. "Mrs. Brooks." She smiled faintly. "It's Angela." He nodded slowly. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I didn't either," she said softly. "But I saw your name on a community project last week, helping inmates find work. I wanted to see if it was real." He took a deep breath. "It is. Everything I do now is because of what you said to me that day. Your forgiveness, it saved me." Angela studied him quietly. "You've changed." "I'm trying," he said. "Every day." She stepped closer. "My husband, Daniel, was a teacher. He believed that mistakes don't end people, they teach them. Maybe now, I understand what he meant." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself. But I'll spend the rest of my life honoring what you and he stood for." Angela smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "That's all I needed to hear." She reached into her bag and handed him something small, a photograph of Daniel Brooks, smiling beside his son. "Keep this," she said. "Not as a reminder of guilt, but of purpose." Ethan held it carefully, as if it were made of glass. "Thank you," he whispered. Angela nodded gently and turned to leave. Before walking out, she said, "Do something good with the rest of your story, Mr. Cole. Not for me, for yourself." He watched her go, his heart heavier and lighter at the same time. That night, Ethan sat by his small desk, looking at Daniel's photo. He thought about everything that had brought him here, the courtroom, the humiliation, the forgiveness, the long nights in prison, and Judge Maya Roberts' voice echoing in his memory. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It just stops the past from owning you." He whispered to himself, "It doesn't own me anymore." Then he opened his laptop and began to write. The title on the screen read, "Lessons from the Fall, My Journey from Arrogance to Accountability." It wasn't a defense. It wasn't an excuse. It was the truth, told in the hope that someone else, somewhere, would read it before making the same mistakes. Months later, the article went viral. Not because of who he was, but because of what he said. People saw sincerity in his words. Schools, youth centers, even law students began inviting him to speak about ethics and responsibility. He always started his talks the same way. I once laughed at justice because I thought I was above it. But justice didn't laugh back, it waited. And when it came, it taught me that humility isn't weakness. It's wisdom learned too late. Audiences sat in silence, not out of pity, but respect. The once arrogant man had become a living lesson. One evening, after finishing a talk at a community center, he stepped outside into the cool night air. A black car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, and there she was again. Judge Maya Roberts. He smiled, surprised. "You have perfect timing, as always." She returned the smile. "I heard your speech. You've come a long way, Mr. Cole." "Thanks to you," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No. Thanks to you. You did the hard part, changing." He nodded. "You once said justice begins after the verdict." "You were right." She smiled softly. "Justice brought you here. But redemption? That's something you gave yourself." They stood there in silence for a moment, two people once divided by a courtroom, now connected by something greater, understanding. Maya extended her hand. Ethan took it. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'm proud of who you've become." Ethan's voice trembled. "That means more than you know." As she drove away, Ethan looked up at the night sky. The city lights shimmered, and somewhere deep inside, he felt a quiet peace. He had fallen from power, from pride, from everything the world thought mattered, only to rise again as something better. Not a millionaire. Not a headline. But a man finally worthy of standing. And for the first time since that fateful day in court, Ethan Cole smiled, not in arrogance, not in victory, but in peace. Because the man who once refused to stand for the black judge now stood taller than ever before.